Just to put it in context a bit, through my career, I ran an ESCO business for a FTSE 100 company. I'm currently involved in the Investor Confidence project out of Europe, so I'd suggest if you could have a look at that, very pertinent for this market. But and I think we all agree there's a fair amount of money that's to be invested in the energy efficiency space. The financial community are very interested. There's a massive estate to go at both in the UK and Europe. But intrinsically, I'm just trying to work it comes back to the point of the value proposition. My view to a certain extent is the ESCO model as it stands just doesn't work within the commercial real estate market. And I'd just really like to explore that if I can with the panel, certainly those that are obviously driving energy efficiency projects within their own estate and their view on the market offering, and those that are trying to consult and support the market to drive this space forward.
Neil?
I'll take that one because I say I'll have to leave in a minute. It depends in what context you mean an ESCO. We're actually working with an ESCO to take over the Central Energy Centre in our Nova project in Victoria. So it is a new marketplace, and there are only a limited number of players in that marketplace. There are challenges, but I think it has its place. If you mean energy saving companies in regards to financing, retrofitting buildings and taking their payback through the savings that are made, again, that probably works better in an owner-occupier marketplace than perhaps a commercial building marketplace. The BBP did produce a report on some of the barriers to sustainable retrofitting buildings. Worth having a look at that. But I think there is work going on to try and overcome that. There's obviously some benefit somewhere to be gained if you can capture future savings to actually release investment in improving buildings. So I think it's worthwhile continuing to look closely at the ESCO potential, but there are challenges.
Good.
Probably better go anyway, the voice is gone, so I'm sure you'll go better with the questions than I will.
Okay, thanks a lot, Neil. Yeah, I mean, is there another response on that?
Yeah, I think the problem with the investor market is there's a number of things. It should work well, because when we look at, we do detailed audits of buildings and you come out with a whole bunch of things to implement, and often we're just told to do the things that have quick payback. And the problem with that is you do the quick payback things when all the things that are left then end up having incredibly long payback and are much more difficult to implement. Whereas if you can package it all together, it's got commercial viability. But I think the problem with the investor community is the hold of the assets. If they're transactional, they're trading these assets, and it can be very difficult to persuade to do an ESCO and a financing model. Generally, the assets they tend to look at are going to be multi-managed over multi-let buildings because that's where they have influence. So that means you've got to engage with all the occupiers. That can be equally challenging. I think that's a big one. But I think also it's just the way the model works. It's massively confusing. We've tried on a number of occasions to implement. We're still trying. We're taking in different scenarios now. But I think because you're guaranteeing performance, people immediately are sceptical. It means massive legal documents, which no one likes, so the lawyers get involved. And because you've got to monitor everything, and you've got to get the legals involved, it means the payback's suddenly double. So instead of just saying, let's get on and do stuff like we did for the case study, if we'd have said, look, let's guarantee it, and so we're going to monitor everything really carefully, we're going to put meters everywhere, we're going to put a lot of consultancy time in, we're going to have legal documents, we wouldn't have seen the payback of 2.5 years probably would have been 6. So I think that's the challenge. I think people need to move away and think about common sense again and say, yeah, actually if we can finance these projects, we can do far more. It's much more credible for the business and for climate change if we package and look at the whole building performance as one. But instead of saying, let's make this guaranteed performance, let's think of risk and say, let's make this a resilient building where we know that if we put the efforts into this and work sensibly with good finance, we know that we're going to get very good payback. So it may not mean that we guarantee 100% return, but if we get 70-80% return of what we've put into it, it's still a phenomenal model. But I think whilst it's still guaranteed performance, you're going to have real challenges.
Good, thank you. Right, we move on. Any other questions?
Shall I shout or
I think we're getting a...
Hi there, thanks. My name's Tim Garden from City Insights, we're one of your sponsors. I've been listening to this morning to an amazing range of amazingly clever ways that sustainability gets built in to buildings, either planning, through the finance, through the control, through the actual technology, right from groundwater through to light fittings made out of spectacles. So it's extraordinary thing. To me, what all that is one of the best kept secrets in the UK. I don't think anyone out there knows about that, or knows about the cleverness of those buildings, or knows when they walk past them or when they're in them. It seems to me, whether you're a buyer, maybe if you're a buyer, but certainly if you're an occupier or working there, or just simply walking past one of these things being put up in your community, how do you know? And what's the value in letting people know? So I really just get people's sense from financial products right the way through to control systems and operation. What's your feeling about the value of getting that information, getting that story out there within the sustainable scenario?
I'll take this one because I've been on the road for the last 4 weeks doing 2 of these a week, and I get, fortunately, BRE are owned by the BRE Trust, and they actually pay me to work with the supply chain, and I go to shows. I was at Hilton yesterday and last week at Excel. Yeah, right, it's not very well publicised. I do articles as well in the relevant magazines, and to a certain extent, you find that half the audience are already the converting, and it's actually persuading more and more people to come on board. And that's really as a result of what are the drivers. And the drivers really are either legislatively or their cost. At the moment, legislation's up for review and cost is flat. So at the moment, we've got a place where the marketplace is really quite difficult to persuade. However, I can see that changing in the next 12 months because costs are going to rise again. And hopefully the outcome from the Treasury review will be a more positive way of actually making these things reportable. Though I very much doubt the taxation side will decrease because once the Treasury's got your money, they're not going to let it go. Does that answer the...
Yeah, I was going to contribute just from a sort of financial or a lending point of view. I think it is definitely something that is communicated within RBS. I know within RBS there's a sort of strategic forum called the Sustainable Energy Forum, and a lot of the work that RBS is doing to sort of finance green energy projects, etc. I think we're one of the largest sort of provider of sustainable or green energy finance in the UK, and I know that is marketed quite sort of far and wide, and they've actually won quite a lot of awards for that. In terms of sort of the work I was talking about, what I've been working on to really build sustainability within to sort of our lending decisions, I think that's a bit harder to sort of communicate and market because obviously there's quite a lot of strong competition law within the UK, so it's about sort of sharing as much as we can without sort of, giving a sort of blow by blow in terms of what our policies actually involve and our risk appetite and things like that. So I think partly doing this is even sort of just getting the message out there, but I know from a sort of financial lending side, I think it's quite far behind in some ways from the private equity side of real estate. So I think we're starting to build that journey, but I agree that it's important that we get this message out, and a lot of that is throughout our engagement with customers, I think.
Good, thank you. We've got time for one very quick question. We have a question over. I think we'll...
It's Debbie. Debbie likes to ask questions.
I promise it's not a hard one, Jess. I know it's close to your and my heart, and I guess it links with the value and the publicity. Is, we know that the valuers still don't put a value on sustainability, even though it's in the RICS code, and they say that's because there's no evidence in the marketplace. What does the panel think we can do to persuade the valuers to start gathering the evidence and value it? Why are we locked in this scenario of we know there's value, we know there's price chipping going on, but the valuers just won't see it?
I think it's for you, Jess, isn't it?
Yeah. So
anybody.
So yeah, we've had in-depth discussions about this. I think there's almost sort of it's threefold. I think the one was the first one is, I was talking about that influence that we have, and I think the valuer's influence can be quite profound, but it's also very much, we can tell them as much as we want that they need to do this, but until we're the ones doing it, it's not that straightforward. But I think it is their responsibility to start addressing this now, and I know that there's been some discussions within the RICS Sustainability and Valuation Group about how we can now, we've built the awareness around sustainability. People should know about it. We've talked about it for a long period of time. We've discussed the value differential. But now it's about actually implementing and taking it beyond just sort of talking about it. And I know that group is very much one of the primary focuses will be to sort of, how can we actually actively get valuers to take this into account? Where can we get the evidence from? Where, let's sit down and show them the evidence. I know Legal in General has a few sort of examples where sort of price chipping has occurred. So I think it's about sort of, that point of view. But then it's also at sort of what point do we kind of need to provide them with that. But it's also, I think, very much comes down to them and their responsibility. And, it's their responsibility to do it at the end of the day. And I'm quite of the mindset that, we help people as much as possible. But then, unfortunately, if they don't accept that this is best practice and it's no longer just sort of a nice to have, but that it's their duty to reflect what's actually happening in the market, and let's be honest, this is not just like a trend anymore, then it's sort of up to them to get left behind, I think, in some ways. But I think there is discussion around, working groups like the Better Buildings Partnership, Commercial Real Estate Lending Group. We've talked about sort of, connecting with other groups like the RICS Valuation and Sustainability Group, and it's something that was discussed in that meeting. So I think we're starting to get to that point where it's sort of, okay, now what can we do? So I think it's just going to be a matter of sort of sitting them down and, getting people not from the large valuation houses necessarily, but even sort of smaller guys. And yeah, I don't know if you have anything to comment on that.
Yeah, not a great deal more. I think the big thing actually is evidence, and valuers. I won't say anymore. But, I think the thing is evidence, and I think collaboration is key. And I identify now in Australia and America, a lot of the figures I came out with is just because of such massive sample sizes of certification. And those are coming from the certifiers, not surprisingly, because they want to show how good they are. But when you've got almost 40% in the US, up to 50% in Australia, they're massive sample sizes, and we just don't have that evidence here. But we could. The BBP has got an enormous number of members, as you're fully aware. And I think collaboration in collecting that data, starting to understand the drivers which it has on covenant strength, that it has on lease lengths, it has on rental growth and value and occupancy, which we could all pull together and then just assimilate in software and see what it means, and then start sharing it with the valuation community. Until they can see the evidence on large scale, it's going to be incredibly difficult. But yeah, I think some of the things we were talking to Chris about a few weeks ago, we can work together. We've got the players. We just need to put it all together.
Yeah. Okay, thanks a lot. I think we better take a break now.